Hello, everyone. Welcome to the rundown, and we'll get rid of one of those lances until we get Starsky in here. Starsky is on the way. I've just spoken with him or DM'd with him, and he said he is en route. We decided to go live because we do a few things to discuss anyway that I might discuss with Macmillan, so I figured that we would discuss that. Commander, thank you once again, as always, for joining us. Appreciate having me.
Glad to be here. So we'll start by saying you're garbling again.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay, so I don't know why that happens for you. I think everyone else hears me just fine. I gotta figure out. Yeah. There's reports of other people hearing it as well. So I really, all right. I do apologize for that. Hopefully, I'm not too bad, and I'll do my best. So,
well, if my audio is reasonable for the crowd, then I will launch into some boring diatribe.
All right. Always garbled. Oh, well, you know what I could do?
Okay. Somebody just said Commander is fine. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll start by discussing the one item you and I have already pre-talked about that I don't think Starsky's going to have a lot to say about, which is the countries issuing get out of Dodge dispatches, notices, whatever you want to call them, to their citizens who are in Russia and Belarus. Just to go over the ones that I know of right off the bat, it's Brazil, Canada, the U.S., and there's one other one. I can't remember who it is. Do you remember?
France.
France. Thank you. So those are the four that I know of for sure. So the question has come up, well, what does that mean? What are the ramifications? What caused them to issue that? So let's start with what does it mean and what are the ramifications? Because that's fairly straightforward and easy.
Let me interrupt real quick. The other interesting thing was they all did it within about an hour of each other. So within an hour of each other, all these. And just, I'm going to ask the live chat, is my audio any better? This is the backup mic, so it's not as good a mic, but hopefully I'm okay. How do I sound to you, Commander?
You're much clearer.
Okay,
you're
great.
Still a little fuzzy, but it's great. So anyway, those kind of diplomatic notices are issued when the intelligence services of a given country say that there's a distinct possibility or strong probability that something dangerous is going to happen in that country. It doesn't mean it's directed at the citizens of the country that in question is issuing the notice. It just means that they are concerned that their people being in either of these countries are at risk. So they issue these notices saying, get out of Dodge. Now, each country, it means something a little bit different. I can't say for certain. I don't know for the Canada, Brazil, France group. For the U.S., there are different levels. There's a recommend that you leave soon or now, and then there's a get out now. When this is issued, it has financial ramifications for the government, because once they issue the you must leave, if a person is unable to leave on their own because of a financial situation, the government is able to, or almost required to, assist them financially to leave said country. There's also a loss of business clause where if you were forced to evacuate and you're in the middle of some sort of negotiations for a contract or whatever, you can sue and get reimbursed for business that you lost. I don't know if that's true with the other three countries. I know there are countries that when they issue we recommend you leave, if you don't leave and something happens to you, like you get arrested by the government for whatever reason, they just go, hey, we told you to leave. You didn't. We're washing our hands of it. It's your problem now. So it means something different to each one of these countries, potentially.
So
These notices are not issued.
The orders and they were issued for each of these countries. They said get out of Russia and get out of Belarus, and in
Right.
At least in, I think it was France's case, and in Canada's case, they're like, if you have to walk out of Belarus, walk out, but leave now. Don't, whatever, just go. So this is, and we got that.
There was no equivocation. No,
Yeah.
Well, in a week or two, it's like head for the door, go, leave everything in the cupboard if you have to do it.
Yeah.
So the key here, I think, is that when you issue this, and since it costs the government something, and there are legal and diplomatic ramifications, it's not something that's done capriciously. It's not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It's not based off of, well, we think things look a little iffy. There's hard intel, and somebody's getting very nervous. So the fact that all four of these got dumped at the same time, to me, is an indicator that at least one, if not more, of those countries had very clear indications something big, in quotes, was about to happen. What that is, we can only speculate. And that's the next side of the question that obviously flows from this, is why would these countries issue this almost at the same time for these two, say, exact countries that people need to leave? So the first speculation that I've heard is perhaps they're getting ready to start another offensive, and it's going to be coming out of Belarus, which is why Belarus is one of the countries. If it was just, the Russians are going to start an offensive, why would you include Belarus? So when you look at that, the question then becomes, okay, if it's attack coming out of Belarus, presumably directed at Kyiv, then we would have other intel indicators that they are building up forces, that it's a substantial threat. And, so where does that flow from here? I haven't seen anything that says there's a significant buildup of personnel, material, supplies, what have you, that would indicate a major offensive is likely. There is some buildup, don't get me wrong, but if one of the three major axes of attack in February of last year that came out of Belarus headed for Kiev was easily blocked, then trying to do it with the far more limited force that's present in Belarus now makes no sense. It's, why would you, if you sent 50,000 men and they failed, so now you're going to send 20,000 men against pretty much the same, if not more, alert and dug-in defense?
Well,
that's not going to work.
And Russia sent 200,000, and no warning was issued. So last year,
but the 200,000 is across the entire front, not the sector coming out of just Belarus.
Yeah, but the warning is for both Belarus and Russia. So why would Russia be included if Belarus was going to join the attack, especially since Russia was not included when Russia initially invaded? It's been a year, and there have been some warnings, don't travel to Russia, but nobody's been saying, get out right now. So it seems to me it has to be something else.
I think what's going on there is the sense of increasing frustration and anger on the Russian side about how much support NATO and the U.S. in particular are giving to the Ukrainians. And the concern is possibly that if they initiate a new phase of the war, expanding it to include Belarus fully, then potentially Belarus and or Russia could both decide to take any of the citizens of the U.S., Canada, France, or Brazil hostage as a way to try to compel those nations to sever any support to Ukraine. That's the next possibility that people have speculated on. That one, that's certainly a possibility, but it's like, why Brazil?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I was like, wait, Brazil? Yeah.
France has been supplying equipment and ordnance and everything. Canada has, the U.S. has, but Brazil, I'll have to check again, but my recollection is that all the support Brazil has sent is non-combat supplies. So like uniforms, rations, medical stuff, no ammo, no guns, no tanks, no planes. So, you know, why would they take Brazilians hostage? I don't know. It's just, it makes no sense logically from there. Maybe the Brazilians are just being extra cautious. And they're saying, well, potentially if the Americans are under threat, our citizens could be caught up in the dragnet of grab all the foreigners. It's prudent to make them leave. Okay, I can buy off on that. But as we saw during the first Gulf War, when Saddam did something quite similar, where he took, my recollection is something like 800 Westerners and their families hostage in Iraq before the attack. It doesn't work out well, typically. If anything, it really solidifies public opinion against you, that you're, you know, threatening 5-year-old Billy who's crying as you're sitting there with this chubby policeman going, oh yes, we're friends with little Billy. Yeah, sure you are, asshole.
Yeah. So, we've been, so it's been several days since this happened, and it feels like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop as we're trying to figure out why. I mean, for us, we almost went to breaking with it, because we're sitting there going like, I think it's worthy of breaking news that a whole bunch of countries just said, get out now. And the U.S. was one of them. And the way it happened, it was just kind of funny, because Brazil was the first one. And so somebody hit me up and said, oh, Brazil just said, get out of Russia and Belarus. I was like, oh, okay, we'll take note of that. And then somebody hit me up and said, yeah, France just said, get out of and I was like, no, they didn't. That was Brazil. You got it wrong. That was Brazil. No, France just said, it's like, no, it's Brazil. I'm telling you, it's Brazil. Then I look at, no, it's also France. I was like, oh, okay, that's a little odd. Oh, Nick, Canada just said. I was like, wait, Canada just said. I mean, this is within the same hour. And then I go look, and there's on Canada's, on their diplomatic website, of the government website. I was just like, oh, shoot. And I was like, yeah. And they put it up on Twitter. They're like, get out now. And I was like, okay. And then someone's like, the Americans just said it. The U.S. said get out. Just like, what? It kind of feels like something's happening. But we also didn't have anything other than they're saying get out. And so we didn't go with it. But we've been workshopping it since. The other one that we've been talking about, and I wanted to get your take on this, is and yeah, we've been and we've been talking to you about it too. It's, you know, okay, is it they're going to take hostages? It feels like something bad is about to happen. One of the things that I thought is, are they going to deploy chemical weapons? We know for a fact that NATO has told Russia, if you deploy nuclear weapons, we will engage. We will involve ourselves in one way or another, probably starting with, as you had said, a no-fly zone. But we believe very, very strongly that they included in that, they didn't just say nuclear, they said chemical or nuclear weapons. We believe that. We don't know that for a fact. That's something that needs to be clear, but I think there's a 99% chance they included and we've talked about why. But we do know they said nuclear. We're assuming they said chemical. We're pretty sure they said chemical too. So one of the thoughts that we had was, okay, maybe Russia's getting ready to deploy chemical weapons. The U.S. knows that if they do, NATO will engage. Therefore, we're saying members of NATO should basically leave these countries. What are your thoughts on that theory?
I think it's a valid one. That's a possibility. They could use WMD. They've been making a lot of noise about that. I think it's somewhat unlikely, because it doesn't really gain them a huge advantage to doing so, and it definitely has a very, very high risk of bringing NATO in, which would completely change the paradigm on the battlefield. So that's something I don't think they want to do. I think it's something much more, I won't say sinister, but you have to understand the propaganda mind that's working inside the Kremlin right now.
Mm.
We are coming up on the anniversary of the invasion. So I easily see that the Russians will want to do something to commemorate that. That's the way they think. They're really big on symbolic gestures. So I could easily see that what we're going to see is, on the 24th of February, suddenly all hell is going to break loose. There'll be a giant general offensive. We've seen announcements in the press that, the Russian Air Force will be getting involved much more strongly in the fighting very soon. So you could easily make an argument there's just going to be this colossal, giant Bondenplatte air raid, coupled with missile volleys, general offensive on the front to, on the anniversary of the start of the war. That's, I think, one of the more likely scenarios in my assessment. You've lost your voice. You're muted. The lips are moving.
Well, I had been told you can read lips, so I don't know what the, all of a sudden well, my headset, the backup headset that I'm using has been spontaneously rebooting every 5 minutes. So when it reboots, I have to reconnect it to it. Oh dear, this is shoestring and duct tape around here. The other thing against the chemical weapon idea is if that's it, and if we're concerned because there's evidence that NATO is going to get involved, you'd think other NATO countries, especially big ones like Germany, would also have issued a similar warning, and they haven't. So there's. The theory that you just gave is the only one that doesn't seem to have any significant drawbacks. I think you would concur the likelihood is something. Well, it's not just the likelihood. There has to be something that triggered this. You don't get 4 or 5 countries, big countries, saying and doing this within hours of each other unless they have intelligence of some kind. So what it is, we don't know. And we've been workshopping it, and so this is a great time to point out as well. If you want to see what we've been talking about and how we've been trying to workshop this and how we're staying on it, get onto our Discord. I also saw that some people have been talking about super chats and the 2 channels. We are simulcasting on In Time and Overtime. Gets a little confusing for people. I appreciate your patience. The reason we're doing it is because Overtime is going to be having a lot of our not as news content, and we're just trying to get that channel up to 1,000 subs. So we're hoping if you could go over there, like, subscribe, it really helps us out. If we can get the subs up there to 1,000, that means we can put the content on there that we want to do, because we're limited. It's not just the super chats. You can't pin messages. We can now use the community tab, which is great, but a lot of limitations to get that to 1,000. So if you can help us out and do that, it's free and it really helps us. If you want to super chat, In Time is the only channel that is monetized. So you have to go to In Time. You can super chat. When we first had Starsky on, we told him that for every show that he comes on, we will take 100% of the proceeds from that show and send them to the charity of his choice. The charity is listed on both channels. It is the 𝐓𝐢𝐻 volunteer organization. He's discussed why that has been his choice. As long as that remains his choice, that is where we're going to be sending all the revenue. So if you would like to super chat, you can go to In Time and super chat there. If you go to Overtime, and the links to each other channel is in the description of each channel. So you can go find that. It's an extra step, I know. It really does help us out, and it's a temporary situation. So thank you all for that. And again, the Discord, you can talk with Commander McMillan. We have a few other resources there. We have all our regular news coverage, and we are workshopping that issue as well as a bunch of others. So So, in your view, basically, maybe something for the anniversary, which is coming up. Is it the 27th? Am I remembering February 27th? It's like 10 days away. It's between
No,
a week
it's either the
or
22nd or 24th, if I remember correctly.
all right. So that's oh, the other reason, of course, these super chats we're donating, but another reason to give a super chat is so I can like get a mic that works. I really want to figure out what the problem with that is. Oh, the 24th. All right.
One of your, people are saying so.
We did have a really interesting piece of advice, which is that you could put your dogs in the center window down there, the one that we normally have reserved for Starsky until he shows up. And I got to tell you, I'm a little,
I don't want to put my poor puppy on.
I'm
He got hurt.
Your puppy got hurt?
Yeah, the big guy and the new guy got in a fight, and he tore the new guy tore up the big guy's ear, so he had to have a couple stitches put in, and so Malamutes are by nature very fuzzy animals. He had the side of it. He looks like he's lopsided. It's really horrible looking.
Well,
he's in good spirits.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'm kind of disappointed. I'm not feeling it right now, and the reason is because, I mean, just honestly, I talked to Starsky, and I was just like, why are you running late? And he's just like, well, there are rockets landing all around me, and I was just like, if I had a nickel for every time somebody just like, why didn't you just say you didn't want to, oh, I'm in a war zone, people are shit, okay.
It's cold. Go back and get another one.
I've heard some pretty lame excuses. I mean, my wife, she's coming out of Boston. Why are you late for dinner? Well, I was getting shot at. Yeah. So the other thing, Starsky had a dental surgery. It's weird for me to just bring that up, but he mentioned it on his channel because he had to miss a stream because of it. But what I commented on, and I said this earlier in the chat, yeah, he had dental surgery, but that I can tell the oral surgeon has done more damage, more injury to Starsky than the Russians have. So my thinking is what Putin needs to do is just get a whole bunch of dentists, put them on the front line. They're not going to do any worse than, it's like he's using, I think they'd be more effective. So, we won't tell Starsky that joke. We are still expecting him. He was on the phone, and I hit him up and just said, and we are just to be completely clear about this. When we first had Starsky on, I thought we'd probably have him on once, and not because we didn't want him on more. I just figured he's a little busy.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. And he does a few shows. He does his own shows, and there's a reason he's trying to get the word out, and we think it's important, which is why we like having him on. We very much agree with that, and I think that's pretty clear. But I didn't expect we'd have him on more than once or twice, and we have him on now every single Friday at 1, so we have been blessed. We miss a couple, and he always, I swear to God, when he misses one, he's like, "Oh, Nick, I'm so sorry." I was just like, "Dude, you're kidding!" It's like he's got the best excuse of anybody who's ever missed a show. I've missed shows, and I'm like, "Yeah, my alarm was the volume was turned to down 0 on the alarm." What's your excuse? Well, there was artillery coming in. I was just like, okay. Yeah, so, and we still, I know he is on the way. When he tells us he's on the way, it means he's on the way. He's in the military. He's pretty precise. My suspicion is he's having any number of difficulties. The other thing that's happened was the last time we had him on, the offensive, and you and I are going to start talking about that. So we're doing the show. We're going to start talking about these things. I'm sure he's going to have a lot to add when he gets here. We're going to talk about that offensive. But he was actually late for the last show because he was in some meetings. Now, when I'm in a meeting, we're talking in time or we're talking whatever. My wife has meetings, but it's like when he has meetings, it's a different thing. So he was just like, yeah, the commanders called him in and they called everybody in, and there was a major offensive happening in Ukraine. So they're still in the middle of that. So we'll see. But like I said, he's let me know he's on the way, and we're going to, as soon as we got him, I got to keep an eye out, because if my headset cuts out and I don't hear him enter the room, but we'll bring him on as soon as we've got him. So last week, Russia started a major offensive. Could you tell us about that, please, Commander?
Well, they have started pushing, or continue to push, in the center, but they're also now pushing in both the southern and northern sectors. It looks like they're trying to envelop the town of 𝐓𝐢𝐦𝐞, and they are making progress on all of these fronts. Now, that progress has come at enormous cost. Depending on which source you believe, they may have taken more casualties in the past week than they took in the first 3 months of the war, conducting these massive offensive. It's almost just giant human wave, infantry's going across open fields, getting mowed down, Battle of the Somme level kind of stuff. Somebody else said that according to some estimates, the number of tanks that were lost in the past week is sufficient to equip 2 full armored divisions.
Jesus.
So that's hundreds of tanks destroyed in the past week. So we're talking catastrophic levels of casualties to gain hundreds of meters at best. So this tells us two things. Number one, that the Russians are able to make progress even against the increasingly better equipped and better trained Ukrainian army. And number two, it tells us that the Russian leadership doesn't give a damn about how many Russian soldiers are lost in the fighting. They're willing to basically destroy an entire generation, if you will, in order to achieve their goals on the battlefield. That's what is going on.
So my understanding was that 𝐓𝐢𝐦𝐞 was, quote, strategically encircled, which my understanding, I would think it would be tactically, but if I'm getting the terminology as I had been told correctly, they were, for all intents and purposes, encircled. I saw a map that showed it, and there was a region that wasn't encircled, but you couldn't travel through that region.
Yeah, there's still a way out, but it's a route that is going to be under fire the entire way if they start pulling troops out. There's been a lot of speculation that the Ukrainians will start pulling out soon. I've even seen some reports that they are beginning to do so. What I think is really going on is the Ukrainians are using this as a way to continue to bleed the Russian army white, preparatory to an offensive of their own, which, this is pure speculation on my part, but I'll say it anyway, with an offensive which I think the Ukrainians will kick off sometime in the late April, early May timeframe.
Now, is your speculation of that because that would be safest given the weather? I assume right now, technically, it's
a combination
doable,
of weather, when a bunch of this new equipment that we talked about previously is going to begin coming online. Those are the two key things, and I also think there's a period that's needed to bring forward sufficient logistical support to make sure an offensive is a success. And this touches on another problem that we know is developing right now, and that's that the Ukrainians are burning through their ammunition supplies, especially their artillery munitions, very, very rapidly. That in large part is why there's so many casualties on the Russian side, is because they're being bombarded constantly by very accurate Ukrainian artillery. But I think nobody anticipated this level of ammo expenditure, and so there may need to be emergency resupply runs brought in from Western nations to keep this possible, because the terrible truth is that if the Ukrainians begin running short of artillery ammo, then their defenses will begin to crumble.
So this leads to two questions. First of all, my understanding is that at this point, it looks like Bakhmut will fall. There's no way to really stop it. It's probably it's not necessarily worth trying to keep that much, other than perhaps bleeding them, as you had suggested. And the loss of life on the Ukrainian side has actually been amongst the highest in the war, as I'm understanding. Are those statements accurate?
Yes. I do think, however, that there is a possibility they will not lose Bakhmut, and that is if the Ukrainians can mount some sort of significant counterattack to eliminate the enveloping arms of the Russian offensive that are starting to encircle the town. So if they can drive those back or cut them off on their own, and that's one of the risks when you try an encirclement operation like what the Russians are doing, is that as you send the pinchers around the objective area, they are increasingly vulnerable to attacks from the sides, because their strength is at the head of those pinchers. That's the offensive effort. And you need to keep throwing troops into the sides to protect against a counterattack. So if the Ukrainians can bring in forces to launch a counterattack, it could well be quite successful and relieve the pressure on the city. The only question is, do they have those reserves to bring in? And if they do have those reserves, are they willing them to commit those reserves to this specific situation, or are they husbanding those reserves for a much more important counterattack in some other sector later? The one I was alluding to for the May timeframe.
I've heard, and not from a source that I'm entirely trusting, so I haven't actually seen this in the news, but what I've heard, that Putin is now considering another calling up of 100,000 more men, which, considering last time when we discussed this, he said he was calling up 100,000. He was calling up closer to 400,000. However many he's going to end up doing in this case, I don't know where he's even going to get 100,000 from. So is there talk that he's actually considering this? What do you know about that?
The manpower is certainly there. The question is how good that manpower is going to be, and whether it accomplishes anything, really, because we know that their logistics system isn't up to the task of equipping all of these new mobilization conscription troops that are being thrown into the front. And each time they do another comb out of the potential recruiting pool in the civilian sector, the quality of the recruits and mobilized troops that they're getting are lower and lower. So you start out, you go and you get all the really healthy kids and the ones who've been on sports teams at the local gymnasium, etc., and they're the first group. So they're at least in decent physical condition. and you kind of have some leftover Cold War equipment to equip them with. You send them to the front, they get massacred. And then you come out the next group, and these kids aren't really physically fit, but they're young bodies. You can throw them into the front, and then we don't really have full sets of uniforms to give them, so we'll give them what we got, and the weapons we're giving them don't even use the same ammo as the rest of the army, but they still shoot bullets, so we'll send them with those, and you send them. And now you're at the point where it's like, okay, we're going to go dredge up the alcoholics, the mentally challenged, and we'll throw them into the front. And each time another wave of these guys hits the front, the quality gets less and less. They get less training. They get equipped with worse equipment. And this is, it's a self-defeating situation. That just this cycle that they're getting weaker and weaker each time they go through this.
The Russian loss in Afghanistan was instrumental in the collapse of the Soviet Union. Could you compare and contrast?
Contributory, I think, would be a better choice of word. Not instrumental, but
all right. Well, I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Without it,
arguably,
would
yes,
have taken long. Okay, so it was a significant piece of it. Is if maybe we
sure.
can. So could you compare and contrast what in Afghanistan contributed to the fall of the Soviet Union and what is happening here in Ukraine?
Sure. So the Russians went into Afghanistan and they were there for about 10 years. During that, depending on whose figures you're willing to accept, they suffered between 8 to 14,000 casualties or killed. And usually you use the metric of for every 1 killed, you have 3 wounded. So you get the numbers. So over 10 years, you get that level of casualty. The number of deaths, the loss of military equipment, the amount of money that had to be expended to supply the army and prosecuting that war was phenomenal. And that stressed the already rickety Soviet system to the point where the cracks were now much larger chasms. That's the situation that happened with Afghanistan. Now you put it in this context, they haven't quite been there in Ukraine fighting this war for a full year. Not 10 years like Afghanistan, just not quite one year. We know, depending on which sources you consult, the reliable ones, that the Russians have suffered somewhere between 100,000 to 150,000 dead.
Jesus.
Again, apply the casualty metric of about 3 to 1. That's 500,000 young Russian men, presumably young, who have been killed or injured fighting this war for a year. Imagine that pressure on the economic and the social situation inside Russia. And then think about what's going to result from that if this continues much longer. Couple that with the fact that the sanctions that are in place against Russia right now as compared to the sanctions in place against the Soviet Union during the Afghanistan war, and you then extrapolate how that's going to impact their economy, I think you're looking at a recipe for implosion.
A former head speechwriter for Russia has come out and is seeking I haven't heard him say asylum, but my understanding is he wants protection, and has said that he believes there's only months left before there is a military coup, that he had heard the military already talking about their extreme dissatisfaction. That's kind of what we want to hear, and he's looking for asylums, so I'm not sure how much stock we can put in it. I mean, I'm tempted to say, yeah, there you go. He's the speechwriter, and that's what he's also a speechwriter. What are your thoughts?
We know there's an enormous amount of stress inside the Kremlin. I've said here before, I will repeat it now. I don't think the decision, the outcome of this war is going to be something that occurs on the battlefield in Ukraine. The outcome, the deciding factor in how this war turns out is going on right now behind closed doors inside the Kremlin. It's who comes to power after Putin is removed. While Putin remains in power, this war is going to continue. He cannot back down because the moment he does, he's a dead man. I mean that literally. They will take him out and pop a cap in his ass.
Well, the projection of strength is extraordinarily important there, and it's a sign of weakness, and it's a sign that he's screwed up, and he's not, and they're not particularly forgiving of they don't have elections. They have elections, but the elections are basically done at gunpoint. And when they've decided your term in office is up, you know.
They offer you a 9mm retirement policy.
Yeah, you get the 21 gun salute, but the guns are aimed just a little bit lower. All right. Well,
excuse me.
So, yeah, please.
I was going to add to what I was saying. The question is what emerges out of that situation when Putin goes away. We know that there are different people who are trying to position themselves as his successor. And the alarming, dangerous side of that is that many of the more likely people who will take power after Putin are actually worse than Putin.
Dear Lord. A little hard to imagine, to be quite honest.
These are people who've been making pronouncements that the reason Russia is losing is because it is holding back its greatest assets, its most powerful weapons. And we all know what that means. So if these idiots come to power, you know, it's an apocalyptic scenario.
The concept of MAD, mutually assured destruction, is a difficult one. Actually, I mean, it's a simple concept, but it's
oh yeah.
It's still
the big problem with MAD is that it relies on rational actors, and
yes.
If you're dealing with megalomaniacs and zealots, it doesn't work. And you know, some of these people, that's the way they think. These are the guys who think, you know, okay, well, I'm going to take the Bolshoi ballerinas and the women's gymnastic team and go hole up in the radiation-proof bunker in the Ural Mountains, and in a couple hundred years, my heirs will emerge with the most glorious repopulation of the earth, and huzzah, huzzah. That's the kind of mindset we're dealing with some of these people.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the theory was that Kennedy was too young to have the resolve to be willing to defend against missiles being put in Cuba. When Kennedy started doing that, but doing so in kind of half measures without actually destroying the sites, being prepared to do it, but not doing it yet, the thinking was he could do it because Khrushchev didn't have the resolve to actually move against Germany, yada, yada, yada. And there's always this gamble of who's got the resolve, who doesn't. One of the things that people have said is NATO has, as we said before, issued a warning to Putin: if you use nuclear weapons, NATO will engage. NATO will enter on some level in this battle. NATO seems to make it pretty clear that what they're saying, this is not a bluff, this is not a, that's a line, and it seems to me that he believes it, because he seemed to pull back from the chemical
Right.
weapons. He's not supplying them with the antidotes anymore. Do you think NATO, if he deploys nuclear weapons, do you think NATO will get involved, and if so, how?
I think in some way or form they have to. I don't think it's avoidable. I think the real issue here is who's sitting in the Kremlin at the time this happens. And I think Putin, as bizarre as it sounds to say it, he's the rational actor. He's not going to cross that magical line. But there are people who are hiding behind the curtains inside the Kremlin who would cheerfully be in a position to do so and make that call if it happens.
We
Cutting out again, dude.
Sorry about that. There we go. I should be back. Sorry about that. So we had a question in the live chat about U.S. resolve in this, and then I think we'll start wrapping it up. We haven't seen Starsky. I haven't harassed him. I don't. Whatever he's doing, he's obviously busy. So I haven't followed up with him. But oh yes, we had a question about a U.S. resolve in this issue and whether or not the American public are starting to feel that we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine, or if our support is waning, and or how either Biden and or members of Congress feel about continuing supporting Ukraine. Is U.S. resolve waning in any way that you're aware of? This is a little out of your expertise, I'm aware, but.
Well, yeah, but here's my opinion, my projection on this. I think it's twofold effect. The easy argument is that there are elements in the political opposition that want to embarrass Biden by pulling the support for Ukraine and then watching Ukraine, collapse or suffer greatly, and then point the finger and say, see, it's all your fault this happened. And that's the kind of mindset these people play with. That's the easy throwaway answer to your question. I think the real answer is a little more indicting of your audience and the entire American public, honestly. And it's that we have a very short attention span. It's been a year. I'll bet if you checked the number of hits you had on the early programs, or here's the war in Ukraine, what's going on, as compared to the number of hits you're getting now, there's a big difference. And it's what catches the American attention right now. It's the bright light over here. Ooh, then another bright light over here. We tend to lose interest. We have a cult of the new, if you will.
Mm.
And I think that's what really is kind of going on here. I think if you asked most Americans, they would be in favor of supporting Ukraine and continuing to support Ukraine. But the longer this goes on, the less likely that willingness to support is going to translate into actively pushing their congressional representatives and other people to make sure that support is realized. And you couple that with the fact that the longer this all goes on, the more other things that are going to crop up in the world where America would be wanted to intervene in somehow. For example, we just had that big earthquake in Turkey.
Mm.
In theory, were Ukraine not going on, a lot of the financial aid that we've been sending to help Ukraine would be available and allocated to supporting our ally Turkey to recover from this enormous tragedy. But that attention is diverted. And the longer this goes on, the more diversions of that attention are going to occur. And those are all going to demand some form of help. So we're chipping away at that monolithic block of cheese of support for Ukraine and taking slices off to hand out to other people. Does that logic follow?
It does. That makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking, I was on another show and we were talking about it, and somebody said, "How can I help Ukraine?" And there's some obvious ones. You know, you send money, you do this or you do that. But especially if you're in the U.S., that's a reasonably easy thing to answer. You write your congressman and say, "I support Ukraine. If you want to have my vote, and I will be a single issue voter on this one. You want my vote next cycle. You will be supporting Ukraine, and you will be telling your colleagues to support Ukraine." Then you find the congressmen who are most against Ukraine, send them letters, and make it a real letter. Handwrite the letter. Don't just email.
Oh yeah, I have fairly close family relationship with our local representative to Congress, and he said that when you get communications, it's less what you say, because they aren't read by the representative or the senator. They're read by the staff. And the staff doesn't really read the whole thing. They just kind of skim it because there's so damn many pieces of correspondence that come in. And so they just say, okay, what's this guy complaining about? Okay, he doesn't like potholes in the road. So this is potholes in the road. How did he communicate? If it's an email, which is the easiest, or text, actually, the easiest thing to set, it's like, it's worth 1 point. If it's a email, it's 2. If it's a phone call, it's 4. If it's an actual letter on paper sent through the U.S. Postal Service, that's the biggest impact. And they just, at the end of the day, effectively, they just add up those numbers and, okay, yep. There's a lot of interest right now in Ukraine, and we got 25 letters that all said, why aren't we doing more to help Ukraine? And that lets that representative and his staff know that's the biggest interest in your district right now, is doing something about Ukraine. So that's how you need to handle this. It doesn't have to be a long letter, but if it's on paper, it has more weight than an email that's 25 pages long.
Absolutely. And the other thing, if you really want to, if you have $100, if God bless, if you have 1,000, as much as I hate to say it, don't send it to Ukraine. If you're in the U.S., don't send it to Ukraine. Find the senators senators or congressmen that you can most easily get in contact with. Find out who's opposing them. So find the ones that oppose Ukraine, that are saying that we should cut funding. Find the ones that are who's running for office that's been opposing them, and then mail those congressmen and say, I have $1,000. If you continue to not support Ukraine sufficiently, I am donating to your opponent. That's simple. You're not my congressman. You're in Texas. You're in whatever. So do as you choose, because I'm not your constituent, but I am letting you know I will be donating to your opponent, because that is how much and that may seem like Ukraine needs food, they need generators. We've talked to Starsky about what they need, but they also need the U.S. to continue support. So if you're in the U.S., yep. Write a letter to your congressman. Once you're done with that, write a letter to other congressmen who oppose it and say, I will financially give to your opponents if you don't. And I hate to be cynical about it, but I agree with you. They especially the ones
I think
they want to get reelected.
There is not. Yeah, I think the key there, Nick, is that implicit threat that you will carry through. It may not change that guy's opinion. He may not begin to support Ukraine, but what he will do is lessen his push to withdraw funding from Ukraine. That's the key.
that is a spectacular point, because we think of it in terms of success or failure. They see it as an Overton window. They want as much money coming in as possible and as much power as possible. So they're not going to sit there and just flip, but you're going to move them slightly, because they say, well, you may not really give that 1,000 if you're not too disappointed. So if their position softens a little bit, maybe, and it's a numbers game, and that's it. And it's
Exactly.
how much influence is going on the scale. And one person doing this doesn't do much. We have a lot of people listening right now. If they all, find someone to do this with, it may just even influence one senator or congressman. And when it's this tight in Congress, that can make all the difference. So for people who've been asking, how do you help Ukraine? I have a harder time if you're in another country. If you're in the U.S., that's how you do it. All right. Well, any other final thoughts on anything that we missed or should discuss from the last week? Any expectations? You had said that you're expecting a major offensive. I think we've seen their last major offensive was really impressive, and we also learned that they take their time. They plan it, and they wait until the time is right.
You're referring to the Ukrainians here.
Yes. Thank you. So thank you for.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the key, is that people are going, well, why isn't Ukraine, liberating more territory? Why haven't they retaken Crimea? Unlike the Russians, they actually do real planning. They build up their forces before they go in. They don't waste the lives of their men in over-the-top assaults. They figure out what they're really doing. I think that's what we're looking at right now, is a pause where they're waiting for the right situation to commit those forces in the right location at the right time. The only other thing I wanted to add is I think we can expect, at least for a brief period in the near future, that Russian terror bombardments will increase markedly.
Okay.
It's the impotent paroxysm of a dying beast, if you will. The statement by the Russian military that they're going to be using their air force a lot more right now suggests to me that they may be running low on missiles, and in order to keep that bombardment going, they're going to start throwing aircraft across the front lines, the hit cities. So it's going to get ugly before it gets better. This is not going to be over soon. Honestly, I don't expect the war to end this year. I expect the earliest it could end would be 2024.
Disappointing to hear, but I remember we had talked to Starsky about it, and he had a reasonably similar assessment. It's unfortunate, but it's this is a long haul. I do think our audience who's here and who's been coming here for some time is aware. So we're going to stay with it as long as it's happening. I think it's important, and that's why we cover it. We did have, so for those of you who I saw a couple of people who were concerned. We did expect Starsky. We did hear from him literally just as the show was starting, and he said he was en route. I take that to mean that he was going home. He's had a lot of meetings with the brass, and he's had some difficulty making a number of programs, including ours. I have every confidence he's fine. He's people have been concerned. He's in a war zone, but I think he's probably fine. He is just it's late over there, and he's a busy guy. So I'm going to be on with the 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴 tomorrow. That's at least my plan. The 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴 will be dropping a link for them shortly, but they have Starsky on every Saturday. We have them on every Friday. So I will be there tomorrow. Commander, I assume you'll be trying to make that if you can.
I'll try, yeah.
So I'm sure he'll be fine, and he'll be there, and so we'll see them then. And I highly recommend, if you would like to see Starsky, go to the 𝐒𝐤𝐿𝐴 and see him there tomorrow. So I am sorry that he wasn't able to make it. Like I said, I have every confidence he's fine, and we spoke to him just moments before the show. So, and he was not ready. So that's the way it is. We've missed him on a couple of occasions. We will still expect to see him next Friday at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Again, if you've gotten through to the show this much, I hope that means you liked it, you enjoyed it. We work hard to have on experts, especially military experts, who can come on and talk to us about these things. We also have on people like Macmillan. Oh, come on, that was funny. But we do our best to do that. So hopefully you like and subscribe. It helps us out in the algorithm. It helps us with the show. If you like the content, share the content with a friend. That really helps us out. And like I said before, if you go to Overtime, like, subscribe. We're trying to get Overtime to 1,000. That allows us to monetize, allows us to pin content and do all sorts of other things. So if you can help us out with that, that is a great way of giving back and saying thank you. We do our best to have a good show for you and to keep you informed. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Commander, for coming on tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And to Operator Starsky, thank you for all the efforts you've done to come on the show. We sincerely appreciate it, and I personally look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Shills. Have a good night, all.